Okay, welcome back. Can you believe we're on week 8? Yeah. So week 8 in a 16-week course, right? So now it's time for the midterm exam. Now the midterm exam and the final are kind of sort of important. They're 12.5% of the entire grade. So you really should put a little bit of effort into studying for this exam, getting prepared for it. And to help you prepare, I've provided you a list of topics that may appear on the exam. Now this is not the questions. It's just a list of topics. And the idea is to help you study. Instead of you having to study this much information, you're going to be studying this much. I'm telling you what's going to be on the exam. Okay, cool. All right, so let's just go over the rules and then we'll go from there. First 7 chapters. This is a take-home exam, obviously, since it's an online course. So it's going to be open book, open internet, open everything. I don't care. There's going to be 40 questions in a pool, but you're not going to get 40 questions. You're going to end up getting 25 questions to do. So I can't tell you which one of the questions you're going to get, and I can't tell you what order they're going to appear. It's going to be completely random. In addition to having these questions, the 25 that'll show up, there's going to be some extra credit questions at the end that everyone gets. So I guess really it's 27 questions. You can do the math and figure out if you have an hour and 15 minutes to do this exam and you have 25 or 27, depending on how you count. You don't have that much time. It's not like you're going to have the time to go, oh, wow, let me go look that up. No, you're going to have to just know these things and just look at your notes really quickly and move on. I mean, you can't spend 2-3 minutes per because you'll run out of time. Okay. I've included the chapter and page number here, and this is really more to help you study because, again, I really don't expect you to be, ordered list. I don't expect you to be going to page 41, in the book at every single one of these questions, okay? So I'm expecting you to know the most of it. All right. I will tell you that just because I give you a page number doesn't mean that the question came from that page, and it certainly doesn't mean the answer is going to be found on that page. This is just a place to anchor you to know what we're talking about. So when you're talking about character entities, you'd go to that section, and that might be where that topic is introduced. But maybe 2-3 pages later is where the actual question came from and the answer. Cool? All right. I have a column here for in the book. And if there's an answer of no, that means either the material was not adequately covered in the textbook or perhaps not even covered at all. So, again, lecture notes. Now, there's kind of a weird thing. I mean, for example, if I say, this question has a no, but I'm giving you a page number. I'm telling you it's not in the book, but I'm giving you a page number. If that doesn't make your head hurt, I'm not sure what would. So that's basically the topic is being introduced on page 82, but pretty clearly you're not going to find it in the book at all, where this question or answer are coming from. Okay, it is a timed test, so you have an hour and 15 minutes, right? It'll automatically close off if you don't finish it in time and save all your results, and you'll have whatever it is you have. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and kind of describe what I had in mind so you can kind of take notes to understand the context of the question. Now, for example, the style here, that's a chapter 3 question, so we're not going to have anything in chapter 3 talking about like descendant selectors because that wasn't introduced in chapter 3. So even though the page number and the chapter actually do tend to provide a little bit of context for the question. Okay, cool. So let's start at the beginning. So the first one is going to be about what's the difference between the internet and the World Wide Web. I don't think you'll have any problems with that one. I hope not. The next one is remember ICANN? You guys wrote a paper on this. How they used to have a contract with the government and let the contract expire, and so now they're out there on their own. So I'm going to ask you some questions about the governance of ICANN or how we participate, or just lots of questions about ICANN which you probably should have figured out by writing your paper. Okay. The next one talks about the standards, the W3C standard process, and remember what they're called and how long it takes to make these things happen. Yeah, if you can remember all that, you'll be in good shape. The next one talks about universal design. They kind of introduced that term on page 5, but the question is going to be the more philosophical part of universal, because we've been using universal design in practically every chapter. But I tagged it here because it's the first time it showed up. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the question is going to be specific. So we're talking about the overall philosophy of universal design. That would be, what we're after there. The next one talks about the URL itself. You know what we're talking about. http://www.kumquat.com. Now, if you can remember the conversation in lecture and in the lecture notes about where the origin of the little www thing and what does that mean, and is it optional, and why did we end up with something called www? If you can remember that, you're going to do really good on this question. The next one talks about markup language, and then talking about the big picture. I'm not specifically talking about HTML or XML or any other example you might come up with. I'm talking in general terms. What the heck is a markup language? What does it do for a living, and why should I care? That kind of question. Cool? All right. The next one talks about the head tag. Remember how the standard has, an HTML tag and then a head tag and a body tag, right? The standard layout of a web page. So I'm going to ask you some questions about things that go inside the head tag, and maybe why they go into the head tag. Why do I put the title inside that rather than inside the body? There's got to be a reason, right? Okay. The next one talks about paragraphs, and I want to order my stuff in paragraphs, and what happens when I have one paragraph above and one paragraph below. How many, like the white space in between, and how much width does it consume? Those kind of things. Yeah, I don't think you'll have too much trouble with that one. The next one talks about ordered lists. You remember the unordered list is the bullet guy, and then the ordered list is the one that typically starts, like 1, 2, 3. But there's other ways you can do this. You can go in there and make it start with, Roman numerals, or start with some other number other than 1. Those are the kind of things that we're going to be talking about in the ordered list. Character entities are entity characters. I often say it both ways. I'm going to be asking you, which one of these are valid-looking entity characters or character entities? I'm going to give you some, and you go through and say, yeah, that looks right. Yeah, I recognize that one, and no, that one's not really one. Okay, that's kind of a simple question. It's just, do you recognize what is a valid one of these guys? The anchor tag, the A tag, right? This is how we do hyperlinks. So I'm going to be asking you questions about, what are the rules associated with this? When should I do this and when should I not? Remember, we even talked about when it would be the most appropriate if you, in the description, the one that fits between the starting A tag and the ending A tag, that stuff in the between, called the description. Sometimes you want it to be very, very, descriptive, like page 2. And then sometimes you want to give it the URL. If you can kind of remember those kind of discussions on what's the rules of etiquette, so to speak, for what goes into the description field, you'll be good to go. Okay. The next one talks about CSS. And so this will probably be one of those philosophical kind of questions, like, what is the design for? And, what's the purpose? And, those kind of questions that are kind of broad brush. And so, again, I'm not going into the specifics. It's more of a philosophical of, why on earth are we doing this? I always like the questions that start with, describe the problem that CSS was designed to solve. That's a good question. I like questions like that. Okay. The next one talks about CSS types. You guys remember how we have inline and embedded, sometimes also called internal, and we have external. So basically there's 3 types, although the book says there's 4 because they have another way of doing external, but I don't count that. Just remember all that. So I'm going to ask you some questions about, when is it most appropriate to use each one of these? Okay, those kind of things. When should I use internal? When should I use external? When should I use, inline? Good questions. The next one talks about the style. You remember how the word style appears as both an element, if you're doing embedded, and it appears as an attribute if you're using inline. Isn't that kind of weird? So I may be asking you some questions about how that part works. How do you use the word style in multiple contexts? So what's the difference between a class and an ID? They basically perform the same functions, right? I mean, both of them are used as selectors in CSS, but there's got to be something different between the two. Otherwise, we wouldn't have two of them. If you remember that, you're in good shape. Descendant selectors. Okay. You remember how this works, where if I said I want to find every strong tag, but inside a block quote. So not just all strong tags, only those that appear inside a block quote. You remember that? That was from a homework assignment. That's what we're talking about. So I'm probably going to give you some, or maybe I'll give you a descendant selector example and have you describe it to me. What on earth is going on here? Kind of a thing. The next one talks about the CSS cascade rules. Remember how I mentioned in the book that the little diagram on the page describing these things wasn't exactly accurate? It was more like what they wanted it to be and how you had to actually tweak it a little bit to make it come out right. Remember that? Okay. So if I have both an external and an embedded and an inline, which one is going to take precedence? That's kind of the question we're asking. Borders versus padding. Remember we talked about how, the margins on the outside and paddings on the inside. Remember all that? That'll be helpful to know. And then we talked about if I draw a box around the paragraph, how the default is like a 0 padding, so it's up against the edge, and 0 margin, which means whatever's on the other side is up against that edge too. So remember all that? Okay, good. All right. Graphic file formats. So I'm going to be asking you some questions like, which of the following support transparency? Which supports, lossless compression? Which supports, interlacing? Those kinds of things. Cool? Next one talks about the image tag. And this is going to be one of those kind of philosophical things. There's a couple things in the image tag which we always have or should have. One is, the image, the href that points to the image. And then we probably should have some alternate text in there so that if you have a screen reader, you'll be able to tell what the heck you're talking about. And then I suggested that you also put in the width and the height in there that exactly matches the physical dimensions of the image. And so this question might be like, what is that part for? What is this part for? What is this part for? Okay, good. The next one talks about the meter tag. Remember we have the meter and progress bars? Yeah. And if you can remember from lecture, I had some trouble making that thing work. And I'm going to ask you some questions about that. Cool. The next one talks about the background image. So inside a CSS, you have a selector and you have some attributes. In this particular case, the attribute is I want to be able to have a background image show up in my document, right? So how do you select that thing? I mean, how do you point? I know if it was just like an A tag or or image tag, I know exactly how you point to this guy. But how do you point to it from inside CSS? Yeah. Okay, we're coming up on the 15-minute mark, so we'll pause this and finish it off in just a few minutes.